it's like the most incredible like acting and delivery, and Nathan and I are watching this and we're just like I'm crying. And
hello, my name is Paul Sawyer. I'm retired from the English department at Cornell University, and I'm here with my daughter, Maggie, who is married to a wonderful man who's also my son-in-law, and or my son, actually, more like it. And he's is born in Korea, and so our family has been enriched not only by his presence but by the knowledge of Korean people, Korean culture that we've Korean and people in America as well that we picked up as a result of the connection with Nathan Kim and his family, and we have been to South Korea with Nathan. I went once, and then Maggie and Nathan have been twice together. And Maggie also turned us on to K-dramas. And I watched two of them, and Maggie and Nathan have watched more. Maggie, I know that with one of the K-dramas that has been important to you and us, our Blues, takes place on Jeju Island. And you and Nathan traveled there actually last year. Would you like to talk about our Blues and about Jeju Island?
Yeah. So we watched our Blues a while ago, before we went to Jeju. I think it was afterwards. We watched another one that takes place on Jeju that you haven't seen yet, Dad. But When Life Gives You Tangerines. Anyway, the Henya, the women that dive. Yeah, so we saw some of them, not quite in action in Jeju, but around, and recognized some of the places from our Blues when we went there. And one of the most like emotional, touching, right, parts of that series is the merchant guy.
Oh, a merchant.
Yeah, and he's taking his mother up Hallasan, the highest point in Korea, and I love mountains, so Nathan and I eventually decided, okay, we're gonna climb Hallasan, we're gonna do it. And part of that was, he's going up with his mother, and it's winter, it's snowing, and he actually can't get to the summit in the end. But we actually did get to the summit. But what I was, surprised, I'll say, is the mother is like, she's very old, right? In the series, and they're climbing together, and she's got her hiking poles. And at one point he says, it's snowing, like, please, someone see her, make sure she gets to the bottom. Okay. And we started preparing for this hike and then going, right. And we pretty relatively quick. This is a strenuous hike. It was 9 hours for us all the way up and down. And, we're saying to each other, how'd the mom get this far? How'd she get this far in the snow? And something else we learned was a lot of retired Koreans would, just pass us on all the hiking trails, right?
Oh my goodness.
They go by, they say, hiking, right? And say, you could do it. Actually, a kid said that to us. Which
you can do it.
You could do it. And the first time we hiked with my mom, actually, the first time we were there, it was a different mountain. We were on Bukhansan in Seoul. But older, maybe retired Korean gentleman that's like, why did you bring them here? Like, this is too strenuous.
Oh yeah. Oh.
It was fine. But and his speech that he makes in the video to his mom, right, back in Our Blues. Like, it's like the most incredible like acting and delivery, and Nathan and I are watching this and we're just like I'm crying, and he's saying, oh, in the spring when the snow melts, I'll bring you to the summit. We'll make it. I'll show you the lake on the top, right? Because there's a crater,
yes,
and then a lake in the crater.
All right. Yeah, and then didn't you tell me that people are very blessed if when they come to the crater, they see the lake as well?
Yeah. So somebody told us that the lake the lake at the summit is not it's often dry. You don't always see water in it, and then also there's often, I don't know, clouds, cloud cover, things that get in the way of that view. And so we're like, I don't know. We'll see. But we did actually, we made it to the top and we saw the lake and there's water. Which was, incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can add to that my memory of our blues, which is that for most of the 12 segments or so, the young man, the merchant, has been unaccountably cold and rejecting towards his mother. And you don't quite know why, but gradually unfolds that it has to do with, I think, an experience of abandonment a long time ago. So that the past history of Jeju is in that movie, which is shot, of course, much after the wartime. And I think she also, if I remember, the mother, they reconcile. Right. And it's after the reconciliation. So the reconciliation is kind of sealed by the walk that they take together. So the climbing and the reconciliation are in a way fused, aren't they? And she is also looking for her village at that point, isn't she?
You're right, but I don't remember where her village is exactly.
And I don't think she ever finds it.
No, but I don't know if it was on Halasama they were looking, or if it was it was somewhere else. But she's looking for the village where she grew up, and it no longer exists. Yeah.
So the reconciliation of son and daughter has a tremendous resonance in that whole series because it's the climactic event, isn't it?
Yeah. The son and his mom. Yeah, and that's I don't remember. Nathan started watching that series first, and then he stopped and was like, "Okay, Maggie, you got to watch this one with me."
Oh yes.
And then we said, "Oh, hey, Dad, we think you might really like this one." And
did.
that was the first K-drama that you've seen? Is that right?
Yeah, that was. Yeah. And then the next one is one that's is a hospital drama. Which and I'll talk about that for a little bit because it's very different. One is set in Jeju Island, and then the second is set in Seoul in a super high tech hospital, and most of the shots are interior. So there's that difference between the two. I think I'll talk about that a bit because what's interesting, and I'll back up a moment before I describe. What struck me so much about Hospital Playlist. Hospital Playlist is the English title.
Yeah.
But I'll say that I saw that season 2 through the lens partly of romanticism. So romanticism is partly known for the rediscovery and infusion of emotion into literature, particularly idealized love objects, what we also call the tender emotions, right? Issues of sentimentality always come up in discussions of romanticism. So I saw this hospital drama kind of through the lens of that. For several reasons. Number one is that genres and movements get transformed through transmission. So that's the case of this K-drama of a hospital scene. Now the hospital melodrama is a Western or American genre, I guess, an American invention phenomenon. Okay, but as I saw this hospital drama in Korean, it felt entirely transformed, entirely different, even though what you saw on the screen would be very similar. So, for example, what's similar is in hospital dramas in the U.S. and also in Korean playlists, you have the distinction between the professionals who have to work through their brains, right? So that hospital dramas are very pertinent to a contemporary context of highly professionalized, highly technologically skilled people. And these folks have to, of course, remain detached to some extent. They have to remain rational, objective, all those things that we think tend to be opposed to emotion, okay? But then then it's the patients that are usually suffering and they're helpless. And so you have the the distinction there at first, but then it turns out the doctors also have feelings, right? So that's a classic situation in American ER dramas, where you find out that even the doctors have their own private emotions. They're not. But in this, and so it went in Hospital Playlist. But what struck me as being very different was, first of all, the acting was stunning, and I remember this in Our Blues.
It's got some of the biggest actors in Korea. Yeah.
And what struck me more and more as I was watching the performances and the acting style in Hospital Playlist is that the characters relied, or the actors relied in an enormous amount on not necessarily on emotional or melodramatic outbursts, but on restraint, and also on silence and on facial expression. So I never remember seeing any movie where you could tell so much from a blank look of a person. And I don't know how those actors did it. And I would love to know more about this technique, if it is a technique, if I'm right in recognizing it as a particular technique, because I recall that even small characters that came in with, worrying about whether their child is going to survive an operation, and who are maybe only for a couple of minutes on stage, that they're already in their roles. So there's an effective naturalism that's really unusual, and that I don't think you get in American dramas. And so why is that so important? Because the whole series of Set in the Hospital is full of intense emotion, right? People who are about to lose their child, or people who have to face difficult questions about whether to have surgery on cancer or not. And then the doctors are marvelously delineated as characters. And I want to point in particular to one character, Dr. An. And why do I point to Dr. An? Because Dr. An comes from a family of priests. He comes from a Korean Catholic family, and all his siblings go to the priesthood, and he's going into the priesthood as well. But he becomes a doctor instead, right? So, and this actor has an amazing capacity to convey a deep humanity and gentleness and kindness. And in a way, he really is not far removed from a figure of religious care and consolation. So medicine and a religion really come together, but in a very subtle way. Those are some aspects that struck me very powerfully in Hospital Playlist, and made this genre feel like it had been transformed and reinvented by Korean people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's in some of the dramas that we've seen, I think there's not only I'm trying to learn the language and actively learning the language, and my husband Nathan, he has the experience of moving to a country without knowing the language at all, and he's like, you just have to watch TV shows, movies. Okay. He's right, it does help. But so some of the other ones I've seen but maybe show a different part of Korea, or a different time of Korea, right? And I think we get that in Our Blues with Jeju, of Jeju culture, and so much of that. And Nathan and I had seen at least one other show by that same producers who did Hospital Playlist. Korea is called Reply 1988, which is sort of a slice of life in this village in Seoul, or neighborhood in Seoul in 88. And there's this thing about watching this 1988 and then having been to Seoul also, of how quickly things change, and how it can just be totally that is no more. Right. My father-in-law is from Masan, I believe his family's from Masan, in the south of Korea, and he said it's my hometown doesn't exist really.
Oh wow.
And so I do feel like I have more of maybe of an attachment I think, to the culture, and then with it the language.
Yes,
and the thing about that the language is so intertwined, right?
Oh, yes.
With the culture. And so
Yeah.
the second time that I went to Korea, we were there actually with my in-laws, and I kind of dragged my sister-in-law to go to the National Art Museum,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
but also to the Hangul Museum. Or saying, please come with me to the, this is my language nerd, kind of interest. And it not only was very
What is Hangul? What is that?
Sorry, the written system, language, which was, created very intentionally. It is very just, I don't know, such a big part of my understanding of Korea and Korean, right? And and like that, they did this short film kind of about the invention of Hangul a little bit. I can't describe it. It was a very good museum. And they had some of the books, pictures, or old of the books that people would read under Japanese occupation, when it was illegal to write in Hangul, and it could have, been wiped out. And this was the museum that just got me so emotional. So I don't know. There's that history, and then with the emotion, the emotion and expressing emotion that feels really different. I think, growing up in our family is pretty expressive and warm, and all of those things encouraging. And what I learned, and I think was told at some point, but it feels very, very, very true from my experience. With my in-laws and that extended family, they're very warm, but the I love you, I care about you is eat more. I made this thing that you like. Please eat a lot. So and I on that. Eat a lot in hospital playlist. You mentioned that, right?
There's so much eating. The young surgeons are always finding special deals in restaurants and sharing the money, and then quarreling over the amount, and then surprising each other. And right, yeah. I didn't touch on the interest in, from a Western point of view at least, the mix in hospital playlist between formality and emotional expression. The actors, particularly the actors that are patients, have incredible ability to simulate weeping. I mean, you never saw such convincing crying. You never saw such convincing crying before in a group of actors. But at the same time, there are student doctors in this series, so that the doctors are not only are they caregivers and healers and counselors and spiritual advisors, but they're also teachers, and the relationship is formal. Remember, it's important for them to retain titles, even though everybody is kind of young. So on one hand, you still have the trace of formality. And then when they themselves, the surgeons, have their own love affairs, it's very chaste, very restrained, very gradual. One breakthrough is I think a woman says, "Do you like me?" And that's like, whoa, do you like me? But then, and here's the oddest feature of this series is that every episode breaks into a rock song, and it turns out. Totally unrealistically, right? That the young surgeons are also in a band. And the lyrics, of course, of the rock songs are things like, "I wish I were a bird flying over you so that I would land on you. My body would break all over you." And you go, whoa, your body would break all. I mean, these extravagantly, even campily excessive images of emotion. Then the doctors go back and they're, "I like you," in their real life. So all these levels of expression were coming and going. And I think you're right, Maggie, that traditional Korea and modern times are intermingling in these dramas. Yeah.
And how they act around each other, and when they're fighting over the food, and they're very, very informal, and and then then you see them kind of go and present, okay, I have to go do surgery,
Yes,
I have to go kind of put on the serious face, and kind of lock into that mode, which
both of the series are both of the dramas are about love, very deeply about love. For example, there's one scene where a bunch of doctors and interns are breaking down when they watch a baby that can't make it, and the baby's bip 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 bip, and they know they can't save this baby, and the baby's in its last minutes, and then you see the people, and then through their faces, you don't see the baby, you see the faces, and then the tears just gushing and gushing, and this baby doesn't belong to any of them. So it's very much about love.
Yeah.
And Our Blues is also very much about love, romantic love, certainly, but the son, mother,
and
reconciliation at the end is very important.
And those two dads.
And the
best friend. That's actually where Nathan taught me the word gonde.
Oh.
Sort of like I don't know, kind of like a grumpy old man, I guess is how he
Oh,
described it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so that guy's a gonde, and I was like, okay. But even them and their friendship through its trials, but
yes,
of love through friendship, and oh my gosh, Youngok, right, and her sister, right? There's that family. Remember her sister?
yes,
Just-
who has you mean the one with this Down syndrome? Yeah. The two fight. That's what gonde is the word that the two fighting neighbors they're fighting, as you say.
They used to be best friends.
They're just
And so they started fighting. Yeah.
yeah.
Everyone's like, everyone knows each other, so they're always pulling them apart.
Yeah. So
that was actually
that's about love. Very
That's
deep,
true.
very much about love. Yeah.
I feel like we saw the market. Some of the markets that we saw when we visited were smaller, but I feel like the market, the market is such an essential part of our blues, right?
Yes.
And we Nathan and I didn't see like that exact market. We were actually looking it up. We're like, where is this one that they found? But that kind of such a recognizable.
Yes.
Kind of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. It feels to me. This is just purely speculation, but what the Western news outlets know about South Korea is that it's an industrial colossus. It's industry and progress and finance and automobiles and so forth. Highly technological, highly competitive economy, and yet here is the sort of the human, the affective side reasserting itself in traditional and then maybe modern ways too. And I say modern ways because the traditional gender roles also really break down in these movies.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the hospital playlist, I think the most distinguished surgeon is this young woman.
Dr. Che, right?
Dr. Che, is a young woman. And of course, men are crying all the time, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So there's entirely, really rethinking and reevaluating of the old association between emotion, weakness, and femininity. I mean, that doesn't really obtain anymore in that world. And that, I imagine, is pretty new in Korea. It's certainly still new in the United States. But
yeah.
K-dramas are going to probably be more influential in the U.S. market. I believe Amazon has invested $40 million in the K-drama,
or a big one,
something like that. Yes, and American films will change, and as everybody knows, a recent Oscar winning film is done by Korean performers. There are great more bonds between the two cultures than the economic and technological only, right? And for me it's been just wonderful getting to learn so much about Korea through these experiences I've had. And for you older folks, if you could get a Korean son-in-law, go for it. Because Maggie married an angel, male angel. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.